Hey everyone, Ghost Mule here, and welcome to my channel, Everyday Backpacker, and today we're just going to get into it. So let's go. So back in 2019, when I first started making this channel, I decided to make the big leap from those big, clunky, outdated hiking boots that I had been using to finally making the jump into trail runners. So I purchased a pair of bright blue Ultra Lone Peak 4s, and I instantaneously fell in love with them. I have been using Ultra shoes ever since. But recently, I was introduced to a new shoe brand which may have toppled the dominance of the Ultra shoe for me. So before I decide to introduce this new shoe brand, spoiler alert, I'm going to give a little bit of the back history as to what Altras are and why Altras are currently the most popular shoe in the hiking community. So Altra as a brand has two major claims to their popularity. The first is that most of their shoes, actually all of their shoes, are what's known as a zero drop. Now, if you're wondering what a drop is the difference between the width of the heel to the width of the toe, which normally, when shoes, creates a slight drop down towards your toes. Being a zero drop shoe, they have the exact same width on the heel as they do on the toes. And the claim was that that is a more natural foot position, which it is, and a lot of people seem to really like it. Not everyone, but a lot of people do. Their other really big noticeable thing was the exaggerated width on the toe box, which a lot of people liken these to being kind of a clown shoe shape. They have a normal width in the heel and the mid foot, and then they go into a wide for the toe box. And of course what this allows, especially with hikers and trail runners, is for, as you go down the trail, your feet tend to begin to flatten and splay out. And what that does is it allows your feet to kind of spread out into that toe box without being hindered. And so those are two reasons why the Ultra became very popular amongst trails community. Now for me, I went with the Lone Peaks. The current iteration of the Lone Peak is the Lone Peak 6. I started out when it was a Lone Peak 4 in 2019. And they've gone through several different changes, some liked, some not liked by various people. But generally speaking, the Lone Peak is a minimalist shoe. So it's very lightweight, has a minimal amount of padding to it, and again, it has those features I talked about previously. I personally go with the non-waterproof version because honestly, you're going to get wet anyways, and a waterproof shoe takes way longer to dry than a non-waterproof shoe. Generally speaking, they have always done me very well throughout the years. But my biggest complaint with them is the same biggest complaint that a lot of people have had over the years, and that is the longevity and durability of the shoe. Now, of course, there's always going to be a little bit of a trade-off in quality versus lightweightness. You know, there is balance there. But over the years, I have noticed a decrease in the quality, unfortunately, of the Ultra. So for that, I'm going to give you a little bit of industry insider information. So shortly after I purchased my Altras in 2019, the Ultra Shoe Company was purchased by the North Face. Shortly after the North Face purchased Ultra, and after the unfortunate death of the founder of the North Face itself was acquired by the Vanity Fair Group. Yes, that Vanity Fair Group. So if you've noticed over the recent times that the North Face seems to not be making much gear, it's because they're not. Once they were acquired by the Vanity Fair Group, they, for all intents and purposes, stopped making gear. And their clothing line went from being more technical to more everyday fashion. Unfortunately, also, I've noticed that some of the quality of their items have definitely decreased. So over the winter season, I was informed by our shoe buyer that we were going to be bringing in a new brand of shoes called Topo. Now the name Topo actually stands for their founder, Tony Post, T-O-P-O, Topo. Of course, Tony Post is a runner. And much like Ultra, Topo is a running brand. So they got their start doing running and trail running. So when I found out we were bringing in the new company, I was actually given an opportunity to test drive a pair of shoes made by a Topo company. We'll talk a little bit more about the shoe in a minute, but this is the shoe that I was given to try out. I think I was given these sometime around October, November of last year. Now the shoe that I just recently purchased to replace my Lone Peaks is going to be the Ultra Venture Pro by Topo. So the Topo shoes have some similarities as well as differences from Ultra. The biggest similarity to them is the shape of the shoe. They also use a regular width heel, a regular width forefoot, and then a very wide toe box. So you get that very similar feel to the Altras. And they also typically are a little bit more minimalist, although this one particular model is a little bit beefed up. One of the big differences with Topo over Ultra is Topo is not necessarily a zero drop shoe. They're a minimal drop shoe. So for instance, this Ultra Venture has a 5mm drop versus this MT4, my test shoe, which has a 3mm drop. So this one has a little bit less drop than this shoe does. If you're ever curious on Topo, on the back of every shoe is the name of the shoe and the drop in the heel. So those are some of the similarities of the shoe, but now I want to highlight some of the differences in the shoe and what gives, in my opinion, the Topo an edge over the Altras. First, the sole on the Topos is made by Vibram. So they do have a Vibram outsole. In this case, it's a pretty aggressive one. This one uses the Topo Mega Grip. The other thing that is really important about this shoe that differs from Ultra is going to be these shoes are designed to last a little bit longer. So you'll notice my MT4s, the ones that I tried out, are pretty well worn on the bottom, but the uppers look almost brand new. The reason for that is most shoes, including the Altras, in order to build their upper, use multiple pieces of fabric that are either stitched or glued together. Of course, gluing can lead to delamination, stitches can break, and ultimately you have some issues with the longevity of these pieces tending to come apart, which usually results in you needing to break out the shoe glued in order to repair them. The Topos, on the other hand, they actually use a 3D printing method. So they create an upper that is three-dimensional, but in all intents and purposes is one piece of material. So there's no opportunities for any kind of delamination or stitching in order to break. In fact, the only stitching that I can find on this particular shoe is around a lace area. Otherwise, it's all pretty much one piece. Now this does make for a little bit of a floppy noise when they before they break in, but all in all, as you can see by this shoe that I have been wearing for over 6 months now, the upper portion of it looks almost completely brand new. There is no separation, there's no wear. The only place that I have any kind of wear is in the bottom because, again, I have worn these like crazy. I wear them at work where I'm on my feet all day. And I also walk to and from work every day, which is about 4 miles every day. And generally speaking, for the last few months, I've been doing it in these shoes. And they're still holding up really well. They're still very supportive. And they look brand new. Comparatively, I bought these Lone Peaks just a few months ago, and I have taken them on a few hikes, and I've used them to and from work a few times. And I've only been on one backpacking trip, and already the back heel on the inside is tearing holes in both shoes. The soles have already begun to flatten, and the grip is already starting to wear off. Really unfortunate because I do really love these shoes, and I really hope Ultra starts to kind of beef it up a little bit. But I think it's time for me to retire these shoes. So the shoe that I am excited to try out on the trail here soon, if I ever get out there again, is the Ultra Venture Pro. So the Ultra Venture Pro has some differences to the MT4 that I talked about before, but I'll get into that in here in a second. Let's get into a comparison though of this versus the Lone Peak. So of course everybody always wants to know what is the weight difference. Well, let's break out my trusty scale and find out. The Ultra Lone Peak 6s come in at 11.1 ounces. The Ultra Venture Pros come in at 11.7 ounces. So they're a little bit heavier, but not by much. So they're still very lightweight and very responsive. Other similarities, again, it does have a very similar fit characteristic, but this shoe has a little bit more aggression to it in its buildup. The first thing that Topo points out on this is the way that they build up the sole. So again, this is a 5mm drop, so it does have a little bit of a drop to it, but it is comprised of a couple different pieces. And the first one is a 3-part zip foam midsole with an external TPU heel counter, which is this orange piece right here. What this does is it gives the shoe the ability to create a light guidance through the gait cycle. So what the hell now? So what all that means is that by using their zip foam midsole with an offset TPU form here, so if you notice it's only on the outside of the shoe primarily, that allows the shoe to kind of guide your foot from a more of a pronate into a more neutral position. as most people tend to be a little bit more pronated in their step. Basically, it just means that the shoe, through its cushion, creates a more neutral foot placement in the step. In case you're wondering what zip foam is their proprietary midsole compound, which in their words is springier than EVA and offers more rebound over life. So EVA foam is what most shoe companies use. It's that lightweight, spongy foam, which unfortunately over time, as illustrated by the Lone Peaks, it can compress. Their claim, and so far my experience has been that the zip foam definitely retains its bounciness over a longer period of time. I do have a little bit of compression in the older shoes, but overall they're still doing really well. And the last part of the foundation of the shoe is the outsole, which in this case is a Vibram Mega Grip outsole. And another really big difference between this and the Lone Peaks, if you've ever gone over rocky terrain in a Lone Peak, you'll know that the Lone Peaks do not have a rock plate. The Ultra Ventures do. They have a 4-foot ESS rock plate built into this part of the shoe, and that will protect your feet from being bruised by sharp rocks as you go over more technical terrain. Now the upper part of this boot, as I said, is non-waterproof, and again it does use that 3D printed top part of the shoe. And you may notice there are a couple little clips on the back here as well as a clip up here in the front, and these are designed to use with Topo's proprietary gaiter to keep stuff out of the top of the shoe if you so desire. Now I've had an opportunity to do a little bit of walking around both at work and on my way home and a few trails, and overall, man, I am super satisfied with this shoe. It has every bit the comfort that the Altras offered me, with a little bit more beefiness to them, and I think, based off of my previous experience, they're going to definitely last longer than the Lone Peak 4s. Now, I'm sorry, the Lone Peak 6s. Now, if you're a die-hard Ultra fan, I understand. They're still really great shoes. They just have a few drawbacks, but I think that this shoe addresses it in a much better way. And because of those, I think that this shoe has a really good possibility of becoming another one of the front-running shoe companies in the long-distance backpacking communities. And that's it, a tale of two shoes. So for me, right now, unfortunately, unless some improvements are made, the Lone Peaks, they're out for now. Topo is going to be my new go-to shoe. I'm really excited to see how it works out. If you have any thoughts or comments or other recommendations of shoes, share those in the comments below. Let's keep hiking on.